There's no doubt that you remember that time when Mullah was brought in front of the Sultan of the day, but the Sultan was in a very bad mood that day, and he said to the Mullah, "I believe that you have the power of mystical insight. Demonstrate a mystical insight to me immediately, otherwise your head will be lopped from your shoulders." So Mullah Nasruddin looked up at this guy and he said, "O great monarch, I see your mother and father sitting on golden thrones, convening with the gods and being served by the celestial angels." So the Sultan was very pleased to hear this, and he said, "Mullah, tell me, where does the power of your mystical insight come from?" The Mullah said, "Fear. Fear will do it every time." Perhaps you'll remember also this story that allows a question to be asked of us as usual. And it's that story about King Solomon, the great King Solomon, who captured the king of the demons, Asmadeus, and put him in chains to enable him to be able to build the temple without interference. But after the temple was built, King Solomon brought the king of the demons, Asmadeus, up to be in front of him, and he said to Asmadeus, "I know the language of the birds. I have power over the winds. I know the mysteries of the sacred name of God. But there is a mystery I have yet to learn, and that is the secret of the mystery of illusion." Now Asmadeus said to Solomon, "I can solve that mystery for you, but I cannot do so whilst I'm in chains, and whilst you are wearing the sacred ring which has engraved on it God's name." Now King Solomon's desire to learn this great mystery was so great, he was willing to take off the chains of Asmadeus and also to hand over the ring that he wore on his fingers that gave him the power of the mysteries of the ways of the sacred name. And so, taking off Asmadeus' chains and taking off the ring from his finger, he gave it to Asmadeus. Asmadeus immediately took the ring and flung it out of the window, where it flew great distances over great lands and seas, to land in an ocean far, far away and sink beneath the waves. In the next moment, he approached King Solomon, who himself was of great stature, but Asmadeus was greater. And he lifted up King Solomon effortlessly and threw him also out of the window, and he flew great distances until he almost lost consciousness. But when King Solomon awoke, he found himself in a desert, tired and thirsty, not knowing where he was. But his thirst made him crawl a distance to where he found water. But just before he dipped his hands in to drink from the water, he looked at himself and saw that he no longer was wearing a crown nor royal robes. But he drank of the water, and not long after a group of Bedouins came by and saw his bedraggled state, and said that they would guide him to a place. He told them that he was King Solomon, and they laughed at him. "You, a king, you're deluded." So he went with the Bedouins, and they took him to the gates of a great city. When King Solomon entered that city, he had to beg for livelihood. But he was a big man of great stature and strength. So it so happened that there was a man carrying loads of fruit and vegetables, laboring under their weight. King Solomon gave aid to this man, who happened to be the head cook of the king of that place. So he was taken on as assistant cook. But soon his talents became evident, and he began cooking meals for the king, who, eating his repast, had to find out who it was who was cooking these meals that were greater than his own cook. So King Solomon was brought out, and he was made the chief cook of that kingdom. But in that position, he was often serving the table where the king and his family sat. And it so happened that the king had a beautiful daughter who was smitten with King Solomon, tall, handsome, and strong as he was. But when the princess demanded that the cook become her husband, the king of that realm was very, very angry, and banished them both to the farthest reaches of his kingdom. But King Solomon and his princess in that place found, even though King Solomon only had with him his wooden staff, was able to use this staff for divination. And they were able to find a fertile piece of land where they made their home, built a little house, and had 3 children. And time passed, and King Solomon almost forgot that he had been a king, happy with his wife and family, when one day he woke up to see in the distance a great wave approaching. That great wave washed his wife and his children from his grasp. And when it abated and was gone, King Solomon found himself lying in chains. After the wave had gone, a band of robbers had come along and found him in this state, bound him up, and they took him to the nearest marketplace, where they sold him as a slave. Now, being of a great size and strong, he was bought by a local blacksmith, and as a blacksmith's assistant, he pounded the hot iron and metals that came out of the forge that the blacksmith had. After a time, it was found that the son of the blacksmith had aspirations to become a jeweler, and as King Solomon had this as one of his many talents, he began to teach the young man the ways of making jewelry. And it came about that the son wished to present a gift to the king of that place, and asked King Solomon to make it for him. And so King Solomon forged a beautiful dove in gold set with gems. But when it was presented to the king knew immediately that this was not made by the hands of an apprentice jeweler, and he insisted on meeting the one who had made this gift. So King Solomon was brought to the palace of this monarch. Now it so happened that also this monarch had a daughter, and her daughter had a recurring dream. But in the meantime, because of the art of King Solomon, he was made the court jeweler, and soon it was found that not only had he the ability to make exquisite jewelry, but that he had great wisdom. So the king made King Solomon his advisor. But back to the princess, who had the recurring dream that in a cave far off there was a stone, and in that stone there was a gem that glowed in the dark and had great power. Now, when King Solomon, being the advisor to the king, showed the wisdom and insights and abilities, who else would be chosen to go on the quest to find this gem but King Solomon himself? So having been given this task, King Solomon set out, traveling far and wide, asking everyone where this cave could be found. It took some years, but finally King Solomon heard some young children talking about the cave in a cove. "Let's go there," they said. And so King Solomon asked them, and the description they gave was just that as recounted by the princess. So King Solomon went where the children showed him, and he made his way up into the cave. Now, in that cave, it was dark, but with King Solomon's abilities, although he was not wearing the sacred ring, soon he was able to see, and found in a crevice a stone. And when he dropped this stone, it split open to reveal that which the princess had described. But King Solomon was tired, so he lay down in the cave to rest. When he awoke, water was flooding around him. Soon he was hardly able to find his way out, but clutching the gem in his hand, he found that the wave washed him out of the cave, and he found himself back at the palace of the king. Now, when this jewel was handed to the princess, she wept with joy to receive that she had dreamt of for so long. The king was so grateful to King Solomon. He asked him what was his greatest wish. And of course, King Solomon said, "My greatest wish is to return to my kingdom." So immediately he was given a ship on which to sail across the seas back to his kingdom. But when King Solomon set out, he could not find his way, and somehow the ship foundered, tossed about on the oceans. But when it became calm, the ship did not move. All that King Solomon could do was to fish from the ocean to provide nourishment for him and the sailors who were with him. And it so happened that in fishing, King Solomon brought up from the depths a most beautiful fish, golden in color. He decided to gut and cook this fish for himself. But as soon as he opened this beautiful creature, there in its depths was the ring engraved with the sacred name of God. King Solomon put the ring on his finger, and immediately he found himself back in his throne room, sitting on his throne. Asmadeus said to King Solomon, "We've been waiting for you for more than an hour." King Solomon could not believe. Years had passed. Years and years had passed in his experience. Asmadeus said to King Solomon, "Now you have learned the secret mystery of illusion. I am now free, no longer needed." And Asmadeus disappeared out of the window, never to be seen again. This reminder that every story, every aspect of every story, every character, every symbol, every archetype is an aspect of our own self. Who is Asmadeus to you? What does Asmadeus represent in this story for us? The king of the demons, bound so that a temple could be built. What temple? What does the temple signify? What does the temple represent for us? What is Asmadeus to you? That aspect of our self through which we can learn the secret mystery of illusion. And why is it not needed any longer when this mystery, this secret is learned? It is said that the end of our journey is to arrive at an absence of illusion. So what meaning does this story have? Asmadeus, king of the demons, no longer needed in the secret mystery of illusion is learned.